Hello friends, I was just giving an update. It is July 30th, 2024, and I today have completed the first day of my 6th round. So that is, oh gosh, I did the math the other day. So I would have had 18 total chemos. I missed the first one. So I have 2 left, so 16, so that was my 15th chemo, which is super exciting. So 2 more Taxoteres to go, 2 more. And then hopefully I'll never ever have to touch that stuff again. But yeah, that's the plan. Okay, so other than that, this Monday was my 32nd mistletoe, I believe. No, I'm sorry, that was my 31st mistletoe, I think. And so yeah, it's a lot of mistletoe, but I did notice the injections are getting a little tender again. I think it's just because what we're dealing with is tissue that's collapsing down on itself, and I don't know if it's just fibrotic at this point and we're trying to break space in there so that the cells aren't becoming, basically walled off to the immune system and able to do some things. So we're trying to keep sort of targeting the dense areas of the tumor, which isn't much now. It's kind of like it's kind of a flat little pancake. So anyway, it's starting to get a little tender again, but it wasn't bad. I drove myself and I got home. I was a little sleepier than normal, but totally rocked it. And then today I had Herceptin and Taxotere. Next week I will have all 3. I'll have Herceptin, Perjeta, and Taxotere, and then I'll finish up with Herceptin and Taxotere again on the 13th. And then it's just Herceptin and Perjeta, which is Perjeta's every 3 weeks, and Herceptin's every week. I'm doing low-dose Herceptin. They can't do a low-dose Perjeta, so there's still a chance for neuropathy, but I'm doing pretty good so far. So I'll probably still lug around my cooling equipment or something. I'll do something for that, but yeah, things are going really well. So I feel like I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know I'm very much still in it. Cancer is not something that just you get rid of in a few months. It's a lifetime thing, but I'm feeling really optimistic. And I did get a meeting with my surgeon, Dr. LeBlanc, and she will be meeting with me on the 19th of August to assess our progression. And I'm sorry if it's hard to hear me. Of course, all my stuff's at the office, so I've got you propped up and I don't have my microphone, so I'm trying to just speak loud. So we'll get an assessment and see where it's at, and then she can schedule me, I guess, within 2 to 3 weeks from there. So I'm really hoping for surgery the week of the 10th of September, which would probably take me out for at least a month physically. So, starting to get into the sort of dog days of the practice, I guess, or the summer, but gonna get more restricted. So just things to think about moving forward. And I wanted to share that I have done a pretty good amount of research on melatonin, but I have a lot more to do. I also, of course, came across some other really cool things, and I'm going to show you my methylene blue. I'm going to take this tonight. I've been trying to do it morning and evening, and I'm getting pretty good. My urine is greenish blue. I do about 10 drops. I think that feels plenty because it's still getting down into my urine, so it's moving out. And then, it totally tastes like dye. So, kind of weird, doesn't feel natural at all. I think a few takeaways from methylene blue, and then I'll talk about melatonin. I think methylene blue has a ton of health benefits. I think it could be harnessed in ways that we're totally overlooking, and it's very safe. But I do think if you don't need methylene blue, let's say you're just a really healthy person, young, you're not going through a lot of oxidative stress. I think everyone does at some point, but I feel like there might be a side of methylene blue that might not be helpful for people. But it's just one of those things that you should learn about and see if it's your own case, if it would benefit you, but that you should know exists, because it could be really helpful at some portion of your life. But for me, this is not going to be something I'm going to drink every day. I'm just, I don't know. I think it's important for what I'm doing right now. I got to boost my hemoglobin. All of my numbers went up a lot, but that's to be expected because I didn't have chemo last week. But they jumped up really well. And so the real test will be how does the next 3 and 4 weeks go. So I'll just keep you guys updated on that. So my teeth are going to get blue real quick. No, you can't see it really, but when I finish this, they'll be on the bluish edge of things. but I also took my colloidal silver. So I did that a little bit ago. So those are really synergistic. So I'm sticking with it, and we're gonna keep rolling with it. I found a really great company that does it in powder, and they send you already in these glass bottles with the powder at the bottom, and you can add your distilled water, which maybe at some point I'll have to get a distilling system, because unfortunately there are some issues with certain companies like Walmart putting oil. There's like a certain acceptable amount of oil that's in distilled water, which is really sad. Plus I'm thinking there's probably issues with the plastic and the leaching of that. So I don't know, maybe someday I'll go down that rabbit train. But melatonin, I have 2 different ones I take. This is my more common one I've been taking, which is pure encapsulations. It's a 20 milligram melatonin, really clean. The best thing about some companies like this is that there's no preservatives, no magnesium stearate, no toxic preservatives, really. You got to be careful of that. And then there's one that's a very, very high dose. This is 150 milligram high dose by Select Balance. This is also super clean. There's no, it's just a cellulose capsule. That's great. So those are 2 really good companies. There are a couple others out there that are really great. I also think there are, if you're like not somebody with cancer and you're just trying to learn about melatonin and see if it's something for you, there are some plant-sourced melatonins that I think they offer a very high bioavailability, so you can absorb them very well. Something to know about melatonin is some people say it's been around longer than dirt, but it's essentially been around, in all cells, including our mitochondria, in all plants, in all mammals. And so it's kind of everywhere. It's sort of ubiquitous in that sense. It's not present in our first 6 months of life, so we don't get good melatonin. So you can get it from mother's breast milk, which is a really wonderful thing. Hopefully you get to have had when you were a child. So I think, we overlook that. That's, fortifying the immune system and making sure they're getting everything that the mother is making that the child cannot quite make, plus it's a bonding thing. It's very natural. So I think that's a really important time frame where we don't make any of it. And then our melatonin actually increases quite a bit until we hit puberty. So it goes crazy high, which is awesome because you're developing and it helps you deal with stress and all the changes of life and things. But of course you have your brain, your frontal lobe's not fully developed until you're like 25. So, there's a lot, probably could use probably even more, but I wouldn't advocate people young taking it, and I'll get to that point in a minute. But at puberty, it significantly drops. So our melatonin production in our body significantly drops down. And it tanks. And then it doesn't really continue ever to go back up. So from there, it's just kind of a slow decline. So after our 30s, it's really we're producing, oh God, I forget now. I can't remember if it was 1 to 5 milligrams or if it was 0.0 to 0.0, 0.03 to 0.01 or something insane. Very small amounts of melatonin end up finally really being produced, especially after that 45-year mark, which is when I think a lot of people should consider supplementing it if you've never done that, because physiologically your body is just not making it well, and a lot of diseases are from chronic long life issues. So I think melatonin could be wonderful for that. So melatonin essentially is derived from tryptophan, and it's converted into serotonin, and then it's converted into melatonin, and they're all little pathways, molecules that are involved in those conversions, but that's essentially the spread. So it does come from tryptophan, just higher in turkey and a few other natural sources, but it's in certain foods like pistachios have a decent amount of melatonin. Not that you should eat mass quantities of any of those things, but some people will say it's better to supplement with tryptophan because then you have the ability for your body to make all the other things it may make with tryptophan instead of going right to melatonin. And that could have some good validity as well, especially when you're not treating things like cancer. So maybe that's something to look at. I know people give dog treats that actually contain tryptophan. I remember, hey Deanie, if you're watching this, Deanie at the greenhouse told me about that one time, and I looked into it. It's totally helpful for dogs to help their stress response and coping mechanisms. And it's probably because dogs also benefit from serotonin and melatonin. So things to think about with that too. But I personally would still stick with, I'm not a big fan, even from my education, of supplementing younger people with melatonin. I'm not a big fan of the gummies. I feel like that's not necessarily the most healthy way of approaching it, because gummies are like sugar, and if you teach somebody at a young age, it's not that I actually now believe that you would stop your androgynous production of melatonin. I don't believe that that's necessarily at play. I think, though, that you might be maybe not timing it properly, or telling the body that it can sort of lean on something that could be improved by better life habits. So one of the reasons we make melatonin is in darkness, and we are in a darkness deficit these days. Artificial light is a real problem in our typical circadian rhythm. So even me talking to you on the screen, like my screen is, I can feel how much brighter it is than when I look at the leaves here, and it irritates my eyes a little to look at it. So I usually put on my blue light glasses, but I didn't, right? So I should have my blue light blocking glasses on right now while making this video. But I will put them on when I go back in, because we're watching the Olympics. So to watch the TV, I usually always put it on. So they're just ways of like making sure that you're not getting those blue wavelengths, so there's shorter wavelengths into your eyes, because that is very stimulating for cortisol. And so that's one of the reasons why it's super important to get up in the morning and get that morning light. And so you're timing your circadian rhythm with the natural fluxes of the sun, and there's a much higher amount of infrared light, which is very helpful in your body creating its own melatonin and essentially helping the mitochondria support ATP production. So I learned that our pineal gland, which is going to be like posterior to the thalamus, it's really adorable. It's close to like the colliculus, which are these really fun, there's like the superior and inferior colliculus, I always love the name, but they're like these little centers, essentially little nuclei for like seeing and hearing. So it's just right above there. And it actually, embryologically, and I knew this before, which is great, that it is not actually within the same brain dura. So it's not trapped in the brain the way the blood-brain barrier lines, which is basically astrocytes. You know, there are like our star kind of cells, and they're all branching together and supporting and creating this sort of membrane. It's not really a barrier, it's a semi-permeable membrane that could become more permeable the more damage that occurs to it, much like how our gut works. And there's all sorts of ways you can test that and see, even just simply with GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, very calming to the nervous system. It should not go through the blood-brain barrier. So if you take GABA as a supplement and swallow it, you know, that is a large molecule. It should not pass through. So if it does help you get sleep and you get good sleep and you're like, wow, what was that? I'll just take it all the time. Okay, what it really is telling you the leaky blood-brain barrier. It's telling you that you need to work on healing that, probably from the gut first. The gut is usually what triggers the brain issues, and it's basically inflammation long-term in a membrane. That makes sense to people, right? Membranes are everywhere in the body. There are some people I've come across that don't believe these exist at all. I do believe the membrane exists, mostly because it's really a flux and it's a pressure changer. It's really to allow certain things to stay in and certain things to stay out, but to allow other things in. You know, it's a barrier that creates a very stable, clean environment for our CSF, which is like our clear plasma, essentially, our cerebral spinal fluid. If you think of that, what's supporting our brain and supporting our spinal cord, you know, it's essentially interstitium. It's fluid. It's just fluid. So it's all about the fluidity of the body, and you have to have these different compartments to sort of like lock in some of this fluid so things glide and slide and they don't get tethered and adhered and inflamed and then create crazy fistulas and things that, like I just learned, there's something that happens with the dura that can cause a fistula. I'm talking to Hancock, he's known as a patient that had that happen, which is super rare. I mean, just, you know, that's not good. So to me, I'm theorizing there's probably torsion in maybe the sphenobasilar fascia going up into the cranial bones. Those are still areas that fascially are very complex, and I'm still studying. I'm not mastering that area yet. I've definitely worked on mastering the pelvis very hard in the last few years. But the cranium is fascinating. I understand it, but I have not mastered it to, you know, really leverage on it. But I will learn those techniques at some point. I'm aware of its complexity, and that's important. So long story short, sorry about the tangent. Melatonin doesn't need to go into the pituitary through the blood-brain barrier. The pituitary has two different sections, and because melatonin is actually released from the nervous system side of the pituitary, not the endocrine side of the pituitary, it does not need to be regulated the same way. So it's very connected to our nervous system, which, if you think the retina is basically a spread out membrane of sensors of our nervous system, it's like our webbing of basically interpreting light, color, shades, all of that. So very much triggered by our eyes. But there's also research showing that our skin can also be triggered. So the blue light glasses, I think, are very important blockers. They'd be even better if they covered the sides of the eyes, because light still gets in this corner even if you got glasses on. So the goggles would be better, but I don't know how many people are going to wear goggles at night. There's also sheets of blocking blue light blocking, like fabric stuff you can put, like screens on your TV and your phones and everything. There's apps you can get now that block blue light. I think it's something to think very seriously about, because this artificial light is these LEDs are saving us energy, but they're not saving us in our body. So they're creating a lot of issues as well. We never had this issue, 100 years ago, I should have looked up when light was created, but essentially we really dealt with candlelight a lot longer. So it's still kind of a new thing. We haven't figured out a way to mitigate that stress in the body yet. But I think most of us are really dark depleted. So think about that when you sit under your infrared, your LED ultraviolet lights at work. If you work in like a hospital setting, they're notorious for leaving the lights on late, and in an area that should be most focused on your health, they're really missing the most basic principles about health, which is just mind-blowing to me. I mean, if you don't allow someone to sleep and just leave lights on them all the time, they will go crazy. They will crack. I mean, we need to get our sleep. Melatonin is the only way we process trauma, the only way we help sort that out and essentially move on. And a lot of people have sleep issues. So it's not all about sleep, though. So the pineal gland being outside of the blood-brain barrier, essentially, and stimulated more in the nervous system, is going to be a big piece, but it's not going to be everything. It's really only producing about 5% of our melatonin in our entire body, which was mind-blowing to me. I didn't know that was a thing. They always say it's the pineal gland, and nobody really understands what's going on there, but they're so worried when the pineal gland calcifies over. But maybe it's not all about the pineal gland. Maybe it's the mitochondria. Maybe we should be looking at that, because even in the mitochondria, which if we go back embryologically as well, they were introduced sort of as like a bacterium almost. They're foreign to what our typical eukaryotic cell was. And essentially, they created the eukaryotic cell to essentially be able to live on its own. And so they were really an invader. And now without them, we are dependent, absolutely dependent on our mitochondria. And so the real mitochondriacs, are out there. They usually go out naked in the mornings, they go out all day long. They love the sun. The sun is really healing. I do think there's times a day that aren't so great as far as UV, but they're really about harnessing the different wavelengths of light and infrared light and infrared saunas, and all these things are ways of stimulating mitochondria, without having to take a supplement. So melatonin, I think, could help quite a lot of people. I think if you're over 45, because of the just dramatic drop in your body and the fact that you get more sensitive to light, your sleep is disrupted anyway. I think melatonin could be something to look at, and maybe working up, maybe starting at like 1 or 5 milligrams and working up to 20. I think 20 is probably good for most people. And then as you get older, you just need to raise it up a little bit, because again, you still produce less and less. And Dr. Russell Reiter has done a ton of research. He's like 87. He started taking it, I think in his 60s, late 50s. And he regrets not taking it earlier, but he's like in fantastic health. And anybody in his lab that has done so many studies, they've done a lot of publishing. And there's, there's like Schumenberger, Dr. Schumenberger. He's the guy who's in this book that I've been looking at. So he's quoted a lot. He's quite edgy, on the edge, the fringe of health stuff. There's been a lot of research. In fact, you could look up the use of melatonin in COVID. There's been, I think, over 10 articles now, probably more now, but quite a bit showing the validity of helping to block that from sort of penetrating deeper in the body. And the body the immune system's more stimulated to essentially clean this stuff out. So super interesting stuff, something to look into. But again, really what you want to do is go from like fixing your habits. First, you've got to fix the light in your house. If you got to get up in the middle of the night and you have to flip on a switch and you can't navigate your house at night, and you should be able to if you've lived in this house a while, you could have little red light, like red and orange, amber, candlelight. I know fire is dangerous, but that wavelength doesn't have any blue light in it, and it won't interrupt your melatonin production. It won't make you start thinking it's noon in the middle of the night, because that's what happens when you flash on a bathroom light. Suddenly your brain just got the message that it's noon, and then you go to the bathroom and you wonder why when you get back in bed it's not easy to fall back asleep. Yeah, I mean, you totally shifted. That would have never happened before. We never would have had lights shining in our eyes that late. Think about people who have to drive late or work late, and shift workers. They all have higher rates of cancer for these reasons, and a lot of other chronic diseases. But the circadian rhythm is a real thing, and you can even break it down to like best times of day to eat and certain foods to eat, best times to be outside in the light. It's all about the rhythms. You're telling your body how to time all these other very complex, metabolic chains and pathways. And it was so simple when we just were outside more, but it's not the way our life is. We're inside a lot now. So I think you got to fix the habits first. And I think you have to instill good habits in young people so they don't lean on supplements. But as you age, it might be something to look at. And, if you end up getting cancer or a chronic disease, or even an infection, there's been some good studies with Lyme's disease and mold infections, then you can maybe think about melatonin on higher doses. So in the cancer community, like last night was the first night I really upped it. I took one of the 150s. I take this, I did a previous post in the past about the radioprotective qualities of melatonin. So I took a 150 milligram last night, and actually woke up fine this morning, got right up. And then I took 3 of these 60 milligrams before I left the house for conventional treatment. But then I brought 3 more with me, including berberine, because I like to drop my blood sugar, and ALA. I brought both of those to sort of, I'm fasting, so I was trying to really stress out the cancer cells. Of course, now I ate a little bit of dinner tonight, but nothing crazy. But so I did quite a bit. That was like 120 in the afternoon to try to stream it out. I mean, it's not going to have it's going to have a pretty short half-life, especially because I'm out in the day and there was still light. I was next to the window. So I still think, though, on the cellular level, it's getting worked into tissues that really could use it. So there has been a study I found that had breast cancer patients on 160 milligrams 3 times a day. And I stayed away from that because, again, I've still been kind of taught to think melatonin is an evening hormone, or not hormone. It has a lot of hormone potential, but it's a neurotransmitter. It has a lot of use around the body. So, maybe I should only do it at night. So I only went up to 60, but I'm going to now challenge that this last round of chemo, because I think it could be protective against the chemo at this point for my other cells, especially because I'm not working with a lot of cancer in my body at this point. So I'm going to be taking melatonin more often throughout the day, especially around chemo. Otherwise, I'll keep it at night, and then when I'm through chemo, maybe I'll work it with Herceptin a little more to help the cardiotoxicity of Herceptin and Perjeta. Maybe it'll help protect my heart cells better, but and I'll definitely do it for PET scans in the future, but we'll just see. I'm going to learn a lot more. I mean, this book talks about getting up into the 200 milligrams. They've had studies of people with really tough cancers that they were giving 1,000 milligrams. That's 1 gram, multiple times a day. And these people were surviving, they were pulling out. Essentially, I should have said this earlier, but essentially melatonin can reverse the Warburg effect, so the aerobic glycolysis, which essentially, instead of the pyruvate being, the pyruvate is essentially what, we're converting our metabolites into. Since there's no oxygen available in the cancer cell, it converts it to lactate. So it's called aerobic glycolysis, but it's an anaerobic process. It's a process of fermentation. So it's kind of confusing from the outside, but when you dive into it, it's like, oh yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's super primitive. We can make fine ATP by fermenting. It works. It's not the most, big bang for your buck. Like, it's not the most efficient thing, but it'll work, and it does work, especially when oxygen's not present. So melatonin, really helpful stress reducer, not just for sleep. It's good for all sorts of chronic diseases and illnesses. It's kind of one of those, I don't want to call it a miracle molecule, but it's like kind of one of those, you know, like you could give biggest dose you could even think about to some animal or a person, whatever, and they will not die. You cannot overdose on melatonin. Not to say I'd go crazy with it, your body just won't use it. But it's not dangerous. It won't take over other, you know, sites of the body like that. I think it's more about making sure that we're being responsible on how we're using it. Now remember, the melatonin is really just the guy at the race pulling up the flag saying, okay, go. Like, he's really the one beginning the cascade of events to help you sleep. The highest concentration of melatonin in the body starts to kick in between 2 and 4. And so if you're one of those people, as later in life, that you start waking up between 2 and 4, super common. It could be an indication that you are not getting into REM sleep, which means you're not, depending on when you're going to bed, you know, usually people go to bed about 9 or 10. 10 is like classic. You really need to be in dark by 10, because it takes a few hours to really get this stuff to like be potent enough that it's really doing a lot. But then it kind of, you know, wears off in the morning. So if you're like, oh, I wake up and then I have to just get up and go, either you're being exposed to light and you shouldn't be. Maybe you're checking your phone even, just something, it doesn't take much. And start noticing how your eyes feel when you see light at that time. It should not feel good, it feels strained. You know, so, and maybe you're on the other end. Maybe you're doing everything right in the sleeping side, but you're being exposed to too much light in the office or your job or cars or something like that. So there are ways to mitigate these things. You have to be aware of them first. My blue water. See, they're starting to get bluer. So I don't believe that you're going to overdose it, and I don't believe you're going to stop your body from making it. I do believe you can overdo it as far as like lean on it too much. But I don't personally get that sleepy from melatonin anymore. I'm taking it I try to do about an hour before I go to bed. That's the best, try to get you into that state, because it will definitely reduce that sleep latency where you lay down and then fall asleep. There's a period of time there. It will speed that up, which is good. But it has also reduced my reading ability. I start reading and then I'm like, nope, I'm done reading. So anyway, that's so far what I've come across with melatonin. I have a lot more information I've been learning about. I sort of went down this hydrogen train, which has been fascinating, and I've stumbled upon Brown's gas now, which is super fascinating. So this is another world I might dive into. I'm definitely going to dive into. And I can talk more about that in the future, but it involves deuterium depleted water and that whole world, which is basically an isotope that shouldn't be in our water. And if you have cancer, they say it's really important to get that deuterium depleted water. You essentially need to get deuterium out of your water, which is very hard logistically. So those aren't like, you're not going to get like a filter or like a machine, because they just haven't been able to make a good one yet. They've been trying. So people lean on hydrogen, and people really lean on alkaline water, and I'll do a whole thing on that. I am not super pro alkaline. I do think there's times that you could use it that could be beneficial, but I really think it would come down to the hydrogen content. You know, essentially we're 62% hydrogen, like 24, 26, something like that, percentage oxygen. And, you know, and we've got these little components of like, you know, our trace minerals that we're really focusing on, and we're maybe missing the hydrogen component. They say that our water these days are more positively charged. You know, we don't have the structured water that's essentially rolling on rocks and being exposed to the ground and essentially gathering up hydrogens. You know, if you've ever read the book, Fourth Phase of Water, which I think I mentioned once before, it's one of the harder books I've ever gotten through, because I'm just focused on so many things right now, but the fourth phase is the plasma phase, and it's a charged phase. I mean, the hydrogens essentially are negatively charged. This is really powerful benefits for the body. Yeah, they're linking all sorts of crazy stuff that it can repair. I mean, it's one of those things, if you did it and you're really chronically sick, you got to do it for like hours. So you have to like have this thing and cart this thing around. But, you know, once you get used to it, you can start doing it at night. In the beginning, it makes you too energized. But if you start doing it at night, after a while, you're used to it, you're fine. Then you can just do it at night, which is a pretty great way to do something for somebody busy like me. But this whole world of plasma and hydrogen and negative ions, this could be, you know, a really important piece that people need to start looking at as far as like, you know, what are these other things that we could choose to approach in the body without having to look at it always being a supplement or, you know, another product out there that you have to buy. I mean, you would have to probably buy one of these to make this, and also you'd want to probably have your own distilled water maker. So you make sure you just get the purest of the pure of everything. But I mean, at the end of the day, that stuff it's not that expensive, especially when you look at if it has the potential it says it does. It's a pretty small investment. So I'm going to start nerding out on that for a little bit. You know, and see like maybe if I could get my hands on one of those before surgery, like how much would that affect my surgery? Yeah, I want to throw everything at it. So if there's a way to cut inflammation in the body and hydrogen is a piece of that, I want to do it. I've been drinking hydrogen water. I just don't think it's enough. The research is helpful and everyone's geeking out on it, but is it enough? I don't think so. So I want to believe it is, because that little water thing isn't cheap either. Like you can get little machines to make that. But I think hydrogen is just a piece of the puzzle. I think there's more to it. I think you have to get this sort of split between oxygen and hydrogen and create this like charged plasma, you know, barrier. This is essentially what keeps fish slippery, which is so interesting. They've been able to survive in super salty, you know, solvent water and be okay. And a lot of it's because they're creating this plasma barrier on themselves. Which is just fascinating. So there's a lot of instances in this in nature. And so, you know, it's just gotten me to look at everything a little different, which I think is always good, to question everything. And that is what science is all about. So I hope you're questioning everything. Never take my word for your advice, because I don't know you and your case. And I'm really learning it, obviously, from me right now. I'm in my journey. So this is just me sharing stuff I'm coming across. It's not a suggestion for you. But if you think this sounds interesting, or any of the stuff I talk about is interesting and you want to ask me about it, please do. I love learning. So if I can help it, you know, apply better for you or make it connect better, I will. But I think at the end of the day, you always have to do your own research. You have to be your own advocate, because most doctors have no idea what I'm even talking about, and they're going to poo-poo anything that they're not comfortable with, unless they're a really open-minded doctor that's like, I don't know anything about that. Tell me more. I have really awesome doctors that actually do that. Not all of them, but I use them for what I need to. And tomorrow's going to be my visit with Dr. T. I'm really excited. I'm going to throw all this information out there and see what she says, and we'll collaborate as a plan, because that is supposed to be, in my opinion, the best patient-doctor balance is collaboration, not, you know, not the doctor like me telling you what to do. I don't like that. It's not going to be perfect for everyone. So always remember that. Do your research. I hope this was helpful, learning a little bit more about methylene blue and learning a little bit about melatonin. Super interesting. I have way more facts I won't bore you with right now, but I think that was pretty good, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. We're almost into August, and this is just exciting. So one more month. Wish me luck. Take care. Yeah, I think that's it. All right. Goodbye.